Hello, hello, welcome in, everybody. I hope you're having a great night or a good day. I hope everything is working out for you on this Sunday. Or if it's daytime, is it Monday for you then? I guess it depends where you're at, huh? I don't know. Let's not dwell on the details. Anyway, so I don't think I updated my last stream when I read, and that's a problem because we're on chapter 12 right now. We're not further along, but it's okay. You didn't miss anything. We're going over the same stuff again, okay? It's all right. All right, and if you see me shaking around, it's because I'm drinking tea again. So we're gonna start on chapter 12, A Piece of Cake. And if you don't recall from the other day or last week, Bond is super bored. Poor man is dying out there with all the peace that's been going around. He can't stand it. Can't stand not being on a mission. So he's bored. He's bored. So we're gonna go ahead and see what he's doing now that he's all bored. So yep, chapter 12, A Piece of Cake. As it turns out, Bond never had to make a decision on the committee's oh my gosh, off to a great start. On the committee's final report. He had complimented his secretary on a new summer frock, and was halfway through the file of signals that had come in during the night, when the red telephone that could only mean M or his chief of staff gave its soft peremptory burr. Bond picked up the receiver. 007. Can you come up? It was the chief of staff. M? Yes. And it looks like a long session. I've told the troop you won't be able to make the committee. Any idea what it's about? The chief of staff chuckled. Well, I have, as a matter of fact. But you'd better hear about it from him. It'll make you sit up. There's quite a swerve on this one. As Bond put on his coat and went out into the corridor, banging the door behind him, he had a feeling of certainty that the starter's gun had fired and that the dog days had come to an end. Even the ride up to the top floor in the lift, and the walk down the long, quiet corridor to the door of M's staff office, seemed to be charged with the significance of all those other occasions when the bell of the red telephone had been the signal that had fired him, like a loaded projectile, across the world toward some distant target of M's choosing. Let me make sure my audio's going. Ooh, okay, good. And the eyes of Miss Moneypenny, M's private secretary, had that old look of excitement and secret knowledge as she smiled up at him and pressed the switch on the intercom. 007's here, sir. Send him in, said the metallic voice, and the red light of privacy went on above the door. Bond went through the door and closed it softly behind him. What's going on with my face? There we go. The room was cool, or perhaps it was the Venetian blinds that gave an impression of coolness. They threw bars of light and shadow across the dark green carpet up to the edge of the big central desk. There, the sunshine stopped so that the quiet figure behind the desk sat in a pool of suffused greenish shade. In the ceiling directly above the desk, a big twin-bladed tropical fan, a recent addition to M's room, slowly revolved, shifting the thundery August air that, even high up above the Regent's Park, was heavy and stale after a week of heat wave. M gestured to the chair opposite him across the red leather desk. Bond sat down and looked across into the tranquil, lined sailor's face that he loved, honored, and obeyed. "Do you mind if I ask you a personal question, James?" M never asked his staff personal questions, and Bond couldn't imagine what was coming. "No, sir." M picked his pipe out of the big copper ashtray and began to fill it, thoughtfully, watching his fingers at work with the tobacco. He said harshly, I don't know what's up with my face being all weird. There we go. He said harshly, "You needn't answer, but it's to do with your, friend, Miss Case. As you know, I don't generally interest myself in these matters, but I did hear that you had been, seeing a lot of each other since that diamond business. Even some idea you might be going to get married." M glanced at Bond, and then down again. He put the loaded pipe into his mouth and set a match to it. Out of the corner of his mouth, as he drew at the jigging flame, he said, "Care to tell me anything about it?" Give me a sec. There's something going on with my lighting. Is it fixed now? There we go. Now what? Wondered Bond. Damn these office gossips. He said gruffly, "Well, sir, we did get on well, and there was some idea we might get married, but then she met some chap in the American embassy on the military attaché staff. Marine Corps major, and I gather she's going to marry him. They've both gone back to the States, as a matter of fact. Probably better that way. Mixed marriages aren't often a success. I gather he's a nice enough fellow. Probably suit her best than living in London. She couldn't really settle down here. Fine girl, but she's a bit neurotic. We had too many rows. Probably my fault. Anyways, it's over now." M gave one of the brief smiles that lit up his eyes more than his mouth. "I'm sorry if it went wrong, James," he said. There was no sympathy in M's voice. He disapproved of Bond's womanizing, as he called it to himself, while recognizing that his prejudice was the relic of a Victorian upbringing. But as Bond's chief, the last thing he wanted was for Bond to be permanently tied to one woman's skirts. Let's see. "Perhaps it's for the best. Doesn't do to get mixed up with neurotic women in this business. They hang on your gun arm, if you know what I mean. Forgive me for asking about it. Had to know the answer before I told you what's to come. It's a pretty odd business. Be difficult to get you involved if you were on the edge of marrying or anything of that sort." Bond shook his head, waiting for the story. "All right, then," said M. There was a note of relief in his voice. He leant back in his chair and gave several quick pulls on his pipe to get it going. "This is what's happened. Yesterday, there was a long signal in from Istanbul. Seems on Tuesday the head of Station T got an anonymous typewritten message which told him to take a round ticket on the 8 p.m. ferry a ferry steamer from the Galata Bridge to the mouth of the Bosphorus and back. Nothing else. Head of T's an adventurous sort of chap, and of course he took the steamer. He stood up forward by the rail and waited. After about a quarter of an hour a girl came and stood beside him. A Russian girl. Very good looking, he says, and after they'd talk a bit about the view and so on, she suddenly switched in the same sort of conversational voice. She told him an extraordinary story. M paused to put another match to his pipe. Bond interjected. Who is head of T, sir? I've never worked in Turkey. Man called Karim Darko Karim. Oh, Karim. Darko Karim. Turkish father and English mother. Remarkable fellow. Been head of T since before the war. One of the best men we've got, anyway. Does a wonderful job. Loves it. Very intelligent, and he knows all that part of the world like the back of his hand. M dismissed Karim with a sideways jerk of his pipe. Anyway, the girl's story was that she was a corporal in the MGB. Had been in the show since she left school and had just got transferred to the Istanbul Center as a cipher officer. She engineered the transfer because she wanted to get out of Russia and come over. That's good, said Bond. Might be useful to have one of their cipher girls, but why does she want to come over? M looked across the table at Bond. Because she's in love. He paused and added mildly, She says she's in love with you. In love with me? Yes, with you. That's what she said. Her name's Tatiana Romanova. Ever heard of her? Good God, no! I mean, no, sir. M smiled at the mixture of expressions on Bond's face. But what the hell does she mean? Has she... Oh, this is Bond. But what the hell does she mean? Has she ever met me? How does she know I exist? Well, said M, the whole thing sounds absolutely ridiculous, but it's so crazy that it just might be true. This girl is 24. Ever since she joined the MGB, she's been working in their general index, the same as our records. And she's been working in the English section of it. She's been there 6 years. One of the files, she said, had to deal with was yours. I'd like to see that one, commented Bond. Her story is that she first took a fancy to the photographs they've got of you, admired your looks, and so on. M's mouth turned downwards at the corners as if he had just sucked at a lemon. She read up all your cases. Decided that you were the hell of a fellow. Bond looked down his nose. M's face was non-committal. She said you particularly appealed to her because you reminded her of the hero of a book by some Russian fellow called Lermontov. Apparently, it was her favorite book. This hero chap liked gambling and spent his whole time getting it all out of scraps. Anyway, you reminded her of him. She says she came to think of nothing else, and one day the idea came to her that if only she could transfer to one of their foreign centers, she could get in touch with you, and you would come and rescue her. I've never heard such a crazy story, sir. Surely head of T didn't swallow it. Now, wait a moment. M's voice was testy. Don't be in too much of a hurry simply because something's turned up you've never come across before. Suppose you happen to be a film star instead of being in this particular trade. You'd get daft letters from girls all over the world, stuffed with heaven knows what sort of rot about not being able to live without you and so on. Here's a silly little girl doing a secretary's job in Moscow. Probably the whole department is staffed by women. She is, wait, hold on, sorry, lost my place. Probably the whole department is staffed by women, like our records. Not a man in the room to look at, and here she is, faced with your, dashing features on a file that's constantly coming up for review. And she gets what I believe they call a crush on these pictures, just as secretaries all over the world get crushes on these dreadful faces in the magazines. M waved his pipe sideways to indicate his ignorance of these grisly female habits. But you must oh, the Lord knows I don't know much about these things, but you must admit that they happen. Bond smiled at the appeal for help. Well, as a matter of fact, sir, I'm beginning to see there is some sense in it. There's no reason why a Russian girl shouldn't be just as silly as an English one. But she must have got guts to do what she did. Does head of Tues say if she realized the consequences if she was found out? He said she was frightened out of her wits, said M. Spent the whole time on the boat looking round to see if anybody was watching her. But it seems they were the usual peasants and commuters that take these boats, and as it was a late boat, there weren't any passengers anyway. But wait a minute. You haven't heard half the story. M took a long pull at his pipe and blew a cloud of smoke up towards the slowly turning fan above his head. Bond watched the smoke get caught up in the blades and whirled into nothingness. She told Karim that this passion for you gradually developed into a phobia. She got to hate the sight of Russian men. In time, this turned into a dislike of the regime, and particularly of the work she was doing for them, and, so to speak, against you. So, she applied for a transfer abroad, and since her languages were very good, English and French, in due course she was offered Istanbul if she would join the cipher department, which meant a cut in pay. To cut a long story short, after 6 months training, she got to Istanbul about 3 weeks ago. Then she sniffed about and soon got hold of the name of our man, Karim. He's been there so long that everybody in Turkey knows what he does by now. He doesn't mind, and it takes people's eyes off the special men we send in from time to time. There's no harm in having a front man in some of these places. Quite a lot of customers would come to see us if they knew where to go and who to talk to. Bond commented, the public agent often does better than the man who has to spend a lot of time and energy keeping under cover. So she sent Karim the note. Now she wants to know if he can help her. M paused and sucked thoughtfully on his pipe. Of course, Karim's first reactions were exactly the same as yours, and he fished around looking for a trap, but he simply couldn't see what the Russians could gain from sending this girl over to us. All this time, the steamer was getting further and further up the Bosphorus, and soon it would be turning to come back to Istanbul. And the girl got more and more desperate as Karim went on trying to break down her story. Then M's eyes glittered softly across at Bond. Came the clincher. That glitter in M's eyes, thought Bond. How well he knew those moments when M's cold gray eyes betrayed their excitement and their greed. She had a lost card to play, and she knew it was the ace of trumps. She said she could come over to us. She will bring her cipher machine with her. It's the brand new Spector machine, the thing we'd give our eyes to have. God, said Bond softly, his mind boggling at the immensity of the prize. The Spectre! The machine that would allow them to decipher the top secret traffic of all. To have that, even if its loss was immediately discovered and the settings changed, or the machine taken out of service in Russian embassies and spy centers all over the world, would be a priceless victory. Bond didn't know much about cryptography, and, for security's sake, in case he was ever captured, wished to know as little as possible about its secrets, but at least he knew that, in the Russian Secret Service, loss of the Spectre would be counted a major disaster. Uh, Wait, Tika says I ain't talking. Like loud? Mm. Oh. Oh, Tika's getting spoilers. Because he can hear me reading, but like YouTube's behind a little. That's funny. Alright, let's see. Bond was sold. At once, he accepted all M's faith in the girl's story, however crazy it may be. For a Russian to bring them this gift, and take the appalling risk of bringing it, could only mean an act of desperation. Of desperate infatuation, if you liked. Whether the girl's story was true or not, the stakes were too high to turn down the gamble. You see, 007, said M softly. It was not difficult to read Bond's mind from the excitement in his eyes. You see what I mean? Bond hedged. But did she say how she could get it? Not exactly. But Karim says she was absolutely definite. Some business about night duty. Apparently she's on duty alone certain nights of the weekend. Sleeps on a camp bed in the office. She seemed to have no doubts about it, although she realized that she would be shot out of hand if anyone ever dreamed of her plan. She was even worried about Karim reporting all of this back to me. Made him promise he would encode the signal himself and send it on a one-time only pad and keep no copy. Naturally, he did as she asked. Directly she mentioned the Spector, Karim knew he might be on to the most important coup that's come our way since the war. What happened then, sir? The steamer was coming up to a place called Ortakoy. She said she was going to get off there. Karim promised to get a signal off that night. She refused to make any arrangements for staying in touch. Just said that she would keep her end of the bargain if we would keep ours. She said goodnight and mixed in the crowd going down the gangplank, and that was the last Karim saw of her. M suddenly leant forward in his chair and looked hard at Bond. But, of course, he couldn't guarantee that we would make the bargain with her. Bond said nothing. He thought he could guess what was coming. This girl. Hold on, I need to fix my lighting. Give me 1 second. Okay, hopefully that kind of fixes my face. My face is being weird. Okay, here we go. Bond said nothing. He thought he could guess what was coming. This girl will only do these things on one condition. M's eyes narrowed until they were fierce, significant slits. That you go out to Istanbul and bring her and the machine back to England. Bond shrugged his shoulders. That presented no difficulties, but he looked candidly back at M. Should be a piece of cake, sir. As far as I can see, there's only one snag. She's only seen photographs of me and read a lot of exciting stories. Suppose that when she sees me in the flesh, I don't come up to her expectations. That's where the work comes in, said M grimly. That's why I asked those questions about Miss Case. It's up to you to see that you do come up to her expectations. Oh man. Bond's in it now. He's gotta go woo this Russian girl who's already supposed to be in love with him, I guess. Let's see. Chapter 13. Bia takes you there. That's the chapter. The four small square-ended propellers turned slowly, one by one, and became four whizzing pools. The low hum of the turbojets rose to a shrill, smooth whine. The quality of the noise and the complete absence of vibration were different from the stuttering roar and straining horsepower of all the other aircraft Bond had flown in. As the Viscount wheeled easily out of the shimmering east-west runway of London Airport, Bond felt as if he was sitting in an expensive mechanical toy. There was a pause as the chief pilot gunned up the four turbojets into a banshee scream, and then with a jerk of released brakes the 10.30 BF flight 130 to Rome, Athens, and Istanbul gathered speed and hurtled down the runway and up into a quick, easy climb. In 10 minutes they had reached 20,000 feet and were heading south along the wide air channel that takes the Mediterranean traffic from England. The scream of the jets died to a low, drowsy whistle. Bond unfastened his seatbelt and lit a cigarette. He reached for the slim, expensive-looking anti-shake case on the floor beside him and took out the Masque of Demetros by Eric Ambler, and put the case, which was very heavy in spite of its size, on the seat beside him. He thought how surprised the ticket clerk at London Airport would have been if she had weighed the case instead of letting it go unchecked as an overnight bag, and if in their turn Customs had been intrigued by its weight, how interested they would have been when it was slipped under the inspectoscope. Q Branch had put together this smart-looking little bag, ripping out the careful handiwork of Swain and Edney to pack 50 rounds of .25 ammunition in two flat rows between the leather and the lining of the spine. Oh my god. In each of the innocent sides there was a flat throwing knife, built by Wilkinsons, the sword makers, and the tops of their handles were concealed cleverly by the stitching at the corners. Despite Bond's efforts to laugh them Oh yeah. Despite Bond's efforts to laugh them out of it, Q's craftsman had insisted on building a hidden compartment into the handle of the case, which, by pressure at a certain point, would deliver a cyanide death pill into the palm of his hand. What the fuck? Don't squeeze that handle too tight. Jeez. Directly he had taken delivery of the case, Bond had washed this pill down the lavatory. Okay, good. No accidental cyanide poisoning going on. Jeez. More important was the thick tube of palmolive shaving cream in the otherwise guileless sponge bag. The whole top of this unscrewed to reveal the silencer for the Beretta, packed in cotton wool. In case hard cash was needed, the lid of the attaché case contained 50 golden sovereigns. These could be poured out by slipping sideways one ridge of welting. Oh man, he's packing heat and he's packing gold? And death pills? Well, not anymore, he flushed it away, but still, geez. The complicated bag of tricks amused Bond, but he also had to admit that, despite its 8-pound weight, the bag was a convenient way of carrying the tools of his trade, which otherwise would have to be concealed about his body. Yeah, jeez, what the heck? Only a dozen miscellaneous passengers were on the plane. Bond smiled at the thought of Lolia Ponsonby's horror if she knew that made the load 13. I don't know what the reference is for that, but okay. The day before, when he had left Anne and had gone back to his office to arrange the details of his flight, his secretary had protested violently at the idea of his traveling on Friday the 13th. "But it's always best to travel on the 13th," Bond had explained patiently. "There are practically no passengers, and it's more comfortable and you get better service. I always choose the 13th when I can." "Well," she said resignedly, "it's your funeral, but I shall spend the day worrying about you. And, for heaven's sake, don't go walking under ladders or anything silly this afternoon. You ought not to overplay your luck like this. I don't know why you're going to Turkey for, and I don't want to know, but I have a feeling in my bones." "Ah, those beautiful bones," Bond teased her. "I'll take them out to dinner the night I get back." "You'll do nothing of the sort," she said coldly. Later, she had kissed him good bye with a sudden warmth, and, for the 100th time, Bond had wondered why he bothered with other women when the most darling of them all was his secretary. Aw, that's nice. The plane sang steadily on above the endless sea of whipped cream clouds that looked solid enough to land on if the engines failed. The clouds broke up, and a distant blue haze far away to their left was Paris. For an hour they flew high over the burned up fields of France, until, after Dijon, the land turned from a pale to a darker green as it sloped up into the Juras. Lunch came. Bond put aside his book and the thoughts that kept coming between him and the printed page, and, while he ate, he gazed down at the cool mirror of the Lake of Geneva. As the pine forest began to climb towards the snow patches between the beautifully scorched teeth of the Alps, he remembered early skiing holidays. The plane skirted the great eye tooth of Mont Blanc, a few hundred yards to port, and Bond looked down at the dirty gray elephant skin of the glaciers and saw himself again, a young man in his teens, with the leading end of the rope round his waist, bracing himself against the top of a rock chimney on the Aiguilles Rouges as his two companions from the University of Geneva inched up the smooth rock towards him. And now Bond smiled wearily at his reflection in the perspex as the plane swung out of the mountains and over the gross-gained terrazza of Lombardy. If that young James Bond came up to him in the street and talked to him, would he recognize the clean, eager youth that had been him at 17? And what would that youth think of him, the secret agent, the older James Bond? Would he recognize himself beneath the surface of this man who was tarnished with years of treachery and ruthlessness and fear? This man with the cold, arrogant eyes and the scar down his cheek and the flat bulge beneath his left armpit? If the youth did recognize him, what would his judgment be? What would he think of Bond's present assignment? What would he think of the dashing secret agent who was off across the world in a new and most romantic role to pimp for England? Bond put the thought of his dead youth out of his mind. Never job backwards. What might have been was a waste of time. Follow your fate, and be satisfied with it, and be glad not to be a second-hand motor salesman, or a yellow press journalist, pickled in gin and nicotine, or a cripple, or dead. Gazing down on the sun-baked sprawl of Genoa and the gentle blue waters of the Mediterranean, Bond closed his mind to the past and focused it on the immediate future, on this business, as he sourly described it to himself, of pimping for England. Hey, you know what? At least he knows that that's his job right now, that he is being pimped. You know what I mean? He's got to show this Russian girl a good time. For that, however else one might like to describe it, was what he was on his way to do, to seduce, and seduce very quickly, a girl whom he had never seen before, whose name he had heard yesterday for the first time, and all the while, however attractive she was, and Head of Tea had described her as very beautiful, Bond's whole mind would have to be not on what she was, but on what she had, the dowry she was bringing with her. It would be like trying to marry a rich woman for her money. Would he be able to act the part? Perhaps he could make the right faces and say the right things. But would his body disassociate itself from his secret thoughts and effectively make the love he would declare? How did men behave credibly in bed when their whole minds were focused on a woman's bank balance? Perhaps there was an erotic stimulus in the notion that one was ravaging a sack of gold, but a cipher machine? Elba passed below them, and the plane slid into its 50-mile glide towards Rome. Half an hour among the jabbering loudspeakers of Ciampino, Ciampino, Ciampino Airport. Time to drink 2 excellent Americanos, and they were on their way again, flying steadily down towards the toe of Italy, and Bond's mind went back to sifting the minutest details of the rendezvous that was drawing closer at 300 miles an hour. Was it all a complicated MGB plot of which he couldn't find the key? Was he walking into some trap that not even the torturous mind of M could fathom? God knew M was worried about the possibility of such a trap. Every conceivable angle of the evidence, for and against, had been scrutinized, not only by M, but also by a full dress operations meeting of heads of sections that had worked all through the afternoon and evening before. But why Bond? He was an operating agent, unconcerned with the general working of the service, carrying in his head nothing of use to the Russians except the details of his current duty and a certain amount of background information that could not possibly be vital. Or they might want to kill Bond as an act of revenge. Yet he had not come up against them for 2 years. If they wanted to kill him, they had only to shoot him in the streets of London or in his flats, or put a bomb in his car. Bond's thoughts were interrupted by the stewardess. "Fasten your seat belts, please." As she spoke, the plane dropped sickeningly and soared up again with an ugly note of strain in the scream of the jets. The sky outside was suddenly black. Rain hammered on the windows. There came a blinding flash of blue and white light and a crash as if an anti-aircraft shell had hit them, and the plane heaved and bucketed in the belly of the electric storm that had ambushed them out of the mouth of the Adriatic. Bond smelt the smell of danger. It is a real smell, something like the mixture of sweat and electricity you get in an amusement arcade. Again the lightning flung its hands across the windows. Crash! It felt as if they were the center of the thunderclap. Suddenly the plane seemed incredibly small and frail. 13 passengers! Friday the 13th! Bond thought of Leolia Ponsonby's words, and his hands on the arms of his chair felt wet. How old is this plane? He wondered. How many flying hours has it done? Had the death watch beetle of metal fatigue got into the wings? How much of their strength had it eaten away? Perhaps he wouldn't get to Istanbul after all. Perhaps a plummeting crash into the Gulf of Corinth was going to be the destiny he had been scanning philosophically only an hour before. In the center of Bond was a hurricane room, the kind of citadel found in old-fashioned houses in the tropics. These rooms are small, strongly built cells in the heart of the house, in the middle of the ground floor, and sometimes dug down into its foundations. To this cell the owner and his family retire if the storm threatens to destroy the house, and they stay there until the danger has passed. Bond went to his hurricane room only when the situation was beyond his control and no other possible action could be taken. Now he retired to this citadel, closed his mind to the hell of noise and violent movement, and focused on a single stitch in the back of the seat in front of him, waiting with slackened nerves for whatever fate he had decided for BEA flight number 130. Almost at once it got lighter in the cabin. The rain stopped crashing on the perspex window, and the noise of the jets settled back into their imperturbable whistle. Bond opened the door of his hurricane room and stepped out. He slowly turned his head and looked curiously out the window and watched the tiny shadow of the plane hastening far below across the quiet waters of the Gulf of Corinth. He heaved a deep sigh and reached into his hip pocket for his gunmetal cigarette case. He was pleased to see his hands were dead steady as he took out his lighter and lit one of the Moreland cigarettes with the 3 gold rings. Should he tell Lil that perhaps she had almost been right? He decided that if he could find a rude enough postcard in Istanbul, he would. That's funny. The day outside faded through the colors of a dying dolphin, and Mount Hymettus came at them, blue in the dusk. Down over the twinkling sprawl of Athens, and then the Viscount was wheeling across the standard concrete airstrip with its drooping windsock and the notices in the strange dancing letters Bond had hardly seen since school. Bond climbed out of the plane with the handful of pale, silent passengers and walked across to the transit lounge and up to the bar. He ordered a tumbler of ouzo and drank it down and chased it with a mouthful of ice water. There was a strong bite under the sickly anisette taste, and Bond felt the drink light a quick, small fire down his throat and in his stomach. He put down his glass and ordered another. By the time the loudspeakers called him out again, it was dusk, and the half moon rode clear and high above the lights of the town. The air was soft with evening and the smell of flowers, and there was the steady pulse beat of the cicadas. Zing, a zing, a zing, a zing, and the distant sound of a man singing. The voice was clear and sad, and the song had a note of lament. Near the airport, a dog barked excitedly at an unknown human smell. Bond suddenly realized that he had come into the East, where the guard dog howls at all night. For some reason, the realization sent a pang of pleasure and excitement into his heart. They had only a 90-minute flight to Istanbul, across the dark Aegean and the Sea of Marmara. An excellent dinner, with 2 dry martinis and a half bottle of Cavalt Claret, put Bond's reservations about flying on Friday the 13th and his worries about his assignment out of his mind, and substituted a mood of pleased anticipation. Then they were there, and the plane's 4 propellers wheeled to a stop outside the fine modern airport of Yeşilköy, an hour's drive from Istanbul. Bond said goodbye and thank you for a good flight to the stewardess, carried the heavy little attaché case through the passport check into the customs, and waited for his suitcase to come off the plane. So these dark, ugly, neat little officials were the modern Turks. He listened to their voices, full of broad vowels and quiet syllables and modified U sounds, and he watched the dark eyes that belied the soft, polite voices. They were bright, angry, cruel eyes that had only lately come down from the mountains. Bond thought he knew the history of those eyes. They were eyes that had been trained for centuries to watch over sheep and decipher small movements on far horizons. They were eyes that kept the knife hand in sight without seeming to, that counted the grains of meal and the small fractions of coin and noted the flicker of the merchant's fingers. They were hard, untrusting, jealous eyes. Bond didn't take to them. Outside the customs, a tall, rangy man with drooping black mustaches. Mustaches? I don't know why it's multiple. He has multiple mustaches. Stepped out of the shadows. Dude, I can't read. He wore a smart dust coat and a chauffeur's cap. He saluted and, without asking Bond his name, took his suitcase and led the way over to a gleaming aristocrat of a car, an old black basket-work Rolls-Royce Coupe de Ville that Bond guessed must have been built for some millionaire of the 20s. When the car was gliding out of the airport, the man turned and said politely over his shoulder in excellent English, "Karim Bey thought you would prefer to rest tonight, sir. I am to call you at 9 tomorrow morning. What hotel are you staying at, sir?" "The the Crystal Palace." "Very good, sir. The car Oh, yeah, very good, sir." The car sighed off down the wide Martin Road. Behind them, in the dappled shadows of the airport parking place, Bond vaguely heard the crackle of a motor scooter starting up. The sound meant nothing to him, and he settled back to enjoy the drive. Alright, we're starting on chapter 14. Chapter 14. Darko Karim. James Bond awoke early in his dingy room at the Crystal Palace on the heights of Pera, and absent-mindedly reached down a hand to explore a sharp tickle on the outside of his right thigh. Something had bitten him during the night. Irritably, he scratched the spot. He might have expected it. When he had arrived the night before to be greeted by a surly night concierge in trousers and a collarless shirt, and had briefly inspected the entrance hall with the fly-blown palms in copper pots and the floor and walls of discolored Moorish tiles, he had known what he was in for. He had half thought of going to another hotel. Inertia and a perverse liking for the sleazy romance that clings to old-fashioned continental hotels had decided him to stay, and he had signed in and followed the man up to the third floor in the old rope and gravity lift. His room, with its few sticks of aged furniture and an iron bedstead, was what he had expected. He only looked to see if there were the blood spots of squashed bugs on the wallpaper behind the bedhead before dismissing the concierge. He had been premature. When he went into the bathroom and turned on the hot tap, it gave a deep sigh, then a deprecating cough, and finally ejected a small centipede into the basin. Bond morosely washed the centipede away with the thin stream of brownish water from the cold tap. Dude, what the hell? So much he had reflected wearily for choosing on hotel because its name had amused him and because he had wanted to get away from the soft life of big hotels. Oh my god. He I don't know where the hell he's at. He probably got some bed bugs or something. Jeez. And don't stay at hotels like this, please. Please, guys, don't do it. But he had slept well, and now, with the reservation that he must buy some insecticide, he decided to forget about his comforts and get on with the day. Bond got out of bed, drew back the heavy red plush curtains, and leant on the iron balustrade and looked out over one of the most famous views in the world. On his right, the still waters of the Golden Horn; on his left, the dancing waves of the unsheltered Bosphorus; and, in between, the tumbling roofs, soaring minarets, and crouching mosques of Pera. After all, his choice had been good. The view made up for many bedbugs and much discomfort. No way is he sleeping in bedbugs. He's gonna bring bedbugs from Istanbul all the way back to England. L. Bond! Jeez. He is definitely bored if bedbugs like and make him feel alive. Jeez. I can't. I can't even. For 10 minutes, Bond stood and gazed out across the sparkling water barrier between Europe and Asia. Then he turned back into the room, now bright with sunshine, and telephoned for his breakfast. His English was not understood, but his French at least got through. He turned on a cold bath and shaved patiently with cold water, and hoped that the exotic breakfast he had ordered would not be a fiasco. I don't know, man. They got bed bugs. Pretty sure that food's gonna, like, be poisoned. Get that food poisoning. Let's see. He was not disappointed. The yogurt in a blue china bowl was deep yellow, and with the consistency of thick cream. The green figs, ready peeled, were bursting with ripeness, and the Turkish coffee was jet black, and with the burned taste that showed it had been freshly ground. Bond ate the delicious meal on a table drawn up beside the open window. He watched the steamers and the cacks crisscrossing the two seas spread out before him, and wondered about Karim, and what fresh news there might be. Punctually at 9, the elegant rolls came for him and took him through Taksim Square, and down the crowded Istiklal, and out of Asia. The thick black smoke of the waiting steamers, badged with graceful crossed anchors of the Merchant Marine, steamed across the first span of the Galata Bridge and hid the other shore towards which the rolls nosed forward through the bicycles and trams, the well-bred snort of an ancient bulb horn just keeping the pedestrians from under its wheels. Then the way was clear, and the old European section of Istanbul glittered at the end of the road, half-mile of bridge with the slim minarets lancing up into the sky and the domes of the mosques crouching at their feet, looking like big firm breasts. It should have been the Arabian Nights, but to Bond, seeing it first above the tops of trams and above the great scars of modern advertising along the river frontage, it seemed a once beautiful theatre set that modern Turkey had thrown aside in favor of the steel and concrete flat iron of the Istanbul Hilton Hotel, blankly glittering behind him on the heights of Pera. Across the bridge, the car nosed to the right down a narrow cobbled street parallel with the water front, and stopped outside a high wooden porte cochere. Not sure what that is. A tough-looking watchman with a chunky, smiling face, dressed in frayed khaki, came out of a porter's lodge and saluted. He opened the car door and gestured for Bond to follow him. He led the way back into his lodge and through a door into a small courtyard with a neatly raked gravel parterre. In the center was a gnarled eucalyptus tree, at whose foot two white ringed doves were pecking about. What? The noise of the town was a distant rumble, and it was quiet and peaceful. I'm so confused by that last sentence. Like, were the doves pecking the tree? They walked across the gravel and through another small door, and Bond found himself at one end of a great vaulted godown, and with high circular windows through which dusty bars of sunshine slanted across a vista of bundles and bales of merchandise. There was a cool, musty scent of spices and coffee, and as Bond followed the watchman down the central passageway, a sudden strong wave of mint. At the end of the long warehouse was a raised platform enclosed by a balustrade. On on it half a dozen young men and girls sat on high stools and wrote busily in fat, old-fashioned ledgers. It was like a Dickensian counting house, and Bond noticed that each high desk had a battered abiscus, oh my God, had a battered abacus beside the ink pot. Not one of the clerks looked up at Bond. Walked Oh my gosh, I cannot read right now. Not one of the clerks looked up as Bond walked between them, but a tall, swarthy man with a lean face and unexpected blue eyes came forward from the furthest desk and took delivery of him from the watchman. He smiled warmly at Bond, showing a set of extremely white teeth, and led him to the back of the platform. He knocked on a fine mahogany door with a Yale lock, and without waiting for an answer, opened it and let Bond in and closed the door softly behind him. "Ah, my friend! Come in, come in!" A very large man, in a beautifully cut cream torsaire suit, got up from a mahogany desk and came to meet him, holding out his hand. A hint of authority behind the loud, friendly voice reminded Bond that this was the head of Station T, and that Bond was in another man's territory and juridically under his command. It was no more than a point of etiquette, but a point to remember. Darko Karim had a wonderfully warm, dry hand clasp. It was a strong Western handful of operative fingers, not the banana skin handshake of the East that makes you want to wipe your fingers on your coattails. Oh my God! Ew, what? And the big hand had a coiled power that said it could easily squeeze your hand tighter and tighter until finally it cracked your bones. Bond was 6 feet tall, but this man was at least 2 inches taller, and he gave the impression of being twice as broad and thick and twice as thick as Bond. Bond looked up into two wide apart smiling blue eyes and a large smooth brown face with a broken nose. The eyes were watery and veined with red like the eyes of a hound who lies too often too close to the fire. Bond recognized them as the eyes of furious dissipation. The face was vaguely gipsy like in its fierce pride and in the heavy curling black hair and crooked nose, and the effect of a vagabond soldier of fortune was heightened by the small thin gold ring Karim wore in the lobe of his right ear. It was a starting oh my God, startlingly starting what? Startlingly dramatic face. Oh my gosh, can't read. Vital, cruel, and debauched. But what one noticed more than its drama was that it radiated life. Bond thought he had never seen so much vitality and warmth in a human face. It was like being close to the sun, and Bond let go the strong, dry hand and smiled back at Karim with a friendliness he rarely felt for a stranger. "Thanks for sending the car to me last night." "Ha!" Karim was delighted. "You must thank our friends, too. You were met by both sides. They always follow my car when it goes to the airport." "Was it a Vespa or a Lambretta?" "Oh, you noticed! A Lambretta. They have a whole fleet of them for their little men, and the men I call the faceless ones. They look so alike we have never managed to sort them out. Little gangsters, mostly stinking burglars who do their dirty work for them. But I expect this one kept well back. They don't get up close to the rolls any more since the day my chauffeur stopped suddenly and then reversed back as hard as he could. Messed up the paintwork and bloodied the bottom of the chassis, but it taught the rest of them manners. Kareem went to his chair and waved to an identical one across the desk. He pushed over a flat white box of cigarettes, and Bond sat down and took a cigarette and lit it. It was the most wonderful cigarette he had ever tasted, the mildest and sweetest of Turkish tobacco in a slim, long oval tube with an elegant gold crescent. While Kareem was fitting one into a long, nicotine-stained ivory holder, Bond took the opportunity to glance round the room, which smelt strongly of paint and varnish, as if it had just been redecorated. It was big and square and panelled in polished mahogany, except behind Kareem's chair, where a length of Oriental tapestry hung down from the ceiling and gently moved in the breeze as if there was an open window behind it. But this seemed unlikely, as light came from the three circular windows high up in the walls. Perhaps behind the tapestry was a balcony looking out over the Golden Horn, whose waves Bond could hear lapping at the walls below. In the center of the right-hand wall hung a gold-framed reproduction of an Antigone's portrait of the Queen. Opposite, also imposingly framed, was Cecil Beaton's wartime photograph of Winston Churchill, looking up from his desk in the Cabinet offices like a contemptuous bulldog. A broad bookcase stood against one wall, and opposite, a comfortably padded leather settee. In the center of the room, the big desk winked with polished brass handles. On the littered desk were three silver photograph frames, and Bond caught a sideways view of the copperplate script of two mentions in dispatches, and the military division of the O.B.E. Kareem lit his cigarette. He jerked his head back at the piece of tapestry. "Our friends paid me a visit yesterday," he said casually. "Fixed a limpet bulb on the wall outside. Timed the fuse to catch me at my desk. By good luck I had taken a few minutes off to relax on the couch over there with a young Roumanian girl who still believes that a man will tell secrets in exchange for love. The bomb went off at a vital moment. I refused to be disturbed, but I fear the experience was too much for the girl. When I released her she had hysterics. I'm afraid she had decided that my love making is altogether too violent." He waved his cigarette holder apologetically. "But it was a rush to get the room to put to rights in time for your visit. New glass for the windows and my pictures, and the place stinks of paint. However," Kareem sat back in his chair. There was a slight frown on his face. "Hey, Berlita, what's up, dude? How you doing tonight? I hope you are taking it easy. And I hope your day was good." So now, Bond traveled from England to Istanbul to go pick up Miss Romanova. And we're gonna see what happens. He's in the process of it. He's trying to pick her up right now. So there was a slight frown on Kareem's face. "What I cannot understand is this sudden breach of the peace. We live together very amicably in Istanbul. We all have our work to do. It is unheard of that my Chair colleagues should suddenly declare war in this way. It is quite worrying. It can only lead to trouble for our Russian friends. I shall be forced to rebuke the man who did it when I have found out his name." Kareem shook his head. "It is most confusing. I am hoping it has nothing to do with this case of ours." "But it was necessary to make my arrival so public?" Bond asked mildly. "The last thing I want is to get you involved in all this. Why send the rolls to the airport? It always ties you in with me." Kareem's laugh was indulgent. "My friend, I must explain something which you should know. We and the Russians and the Americans have a paid man in all the hotels, and we have all bribed an official at the secret police at headquarters, and we receive a carbon copy of the list of all foreigners entering the country every day by air or train or sea. Given a few more days, I could have smuggled you in through the Greek frontier. But for what purpose? Your existence here has to be known to the other side so that our friend can contact you. It is in conditions she has laid out that she will make her own arrangements for the meeting. Perhaps she does not trust our security. Who knows? Oh, but she was definite about it, and she said, as if I didn't know it, that her center would immediately be advised of your arrival." Kareem shrugged his broad shoulders. "So why make things difficult for her? I am merely concerned with making things easy and comfortable for you, so that you will at least enjoy your stay, even if it is fruitless." Bond laughed. "Ha! ha! I take it all back. I'd forgotten the Balkan formula. Anyway, I'm under your orders here. You tell me what to do and I'll do it." Kareem waved the subject aside. "And now, since we are talking of your comfort, how is your hotel? I was surprised you chose the palace. It is a little better than a disorderly house, what the French call a bisyndrome, and it's quite a haunt of the Russians. Not that that matters." It's not too bad. I just didn't want to stay at the Istanbul Hilton or one of the other small places." "Money?" Kareem reached into a drawer and took out a flat packet of new green notes. "Here's 1,000 Turkish pounds, their real value, and their rate on the black market is about 20 to the pound. The official rate is 7. Tell me when you've finished them, and I'll give you as many more as you want. We can do our accounts after the game. It's muck anyway. Ever since Croesus, the first millionaire, invented gold coins, money has depreciated, and the face of the coin has been debased as fast as its value. First the faces of gods were on the coins, then the faces of kings, then of presidents. Now there is no face at all. Look at all this stuff." Kareem tossed the money over to Bond. "Today's only paper with a picture of a public building and the signature of a cashier. Muck! The miracle is that you can still buy things with it. However, what else? Cigarettes? Smoke only these. I will have a few hundred sent up to your hotel. They're the best. Diplomatus. They're not easy to get. Most of them go to the ministries and the embassies. Anything else before we get down to business? Don't worry about your meals and your leisure. I look after both. I shall enjoy it, and if you will forgive me, I wish to stay close to you while you are here." "Nothing else," said Bond, "except that you must come over to London one day." "Ha! Never!" said Kareem definitely. "The weather and the women are far too cold, and I am proud to have you here. It reminds me of the war. Now," he rang a bell on his desk,
Do you like your coffee plain or sweet? In Turkey, we cannot talk seriously without coffee or raki, and it is too early for raki. Plain.
The door behind Bond opened. Cream barked an order. When the door was shut, Cream unlocked a drawer and took out a file and put it in front of him. He smacked his hand down on it.
My friend!
He smiled grimly.
I do not know what to say about this case.
He leaned back in his chair and linked his hands behind his neck. Has it ever occurred to you that our kind of work is rather like shooting a film? So often I have got everybody on location, and I think I can start turning the handle.
Then it's the weather, and then it's the actors, and then it's the accidents. And there is something else that also happens in the making of a film. Love appears in some shape or form, at the very worst, as it is now, between the two stars. To me, that is the most confusing factor in this case, and the most inscrutable one. Does this girl really love her idea of you? Will she love you when she sees you? Will you be able to love her enough to make her come over? Bond made no comment. There was a knock on the door, and the head clerk put a china egg-shell enclosed in gold filigree in front of each of them, and went out. Bond sipped his coffee and put it down. It was good, but thick with grains. Kareem swallowed his at a gulp and fitted a cigarette into his holder and lit it. But there is nothing we can do about this love matter, Kareem continued, speaking half to himself. We can only wait and see. In the meantime, there are other things. He leant forward against the desk and looked across at Bond, his eyes suddenly very hard and shrewd. There is something going on in the enemy camp, my friend. It is not only this attempt to get rid of me. There are comings and goings. I have few facts. Oh, excuse me. He reached up a big index finger and laid it alongside his nose. But I have this. He tapped the side of his nose as if he was petting a dog. But this is a good friend of mine, and I trust him. He brought his hand slowly and significantly down to the desk and added softly, and if its stakes were not so big. Oh my gosh, if I could read. But if the stakes were not so big, I would say to you, go home, my friend. Go home. There's something here to get away from. Kareem sat back. The tension went out of his voice. He barked out a harsh laugh. Oh, but we are not old women. And this is our work, so let us forget my nose and get on with the job. First of all, is there anything I could tell you that you do not know? The girl has made no sign of life since my signal, and I have no other information. But perhaps you would like to ask me some questions about the meeting? There's only one thing I want to know, said Bond flatly. What do you think of this girl? Do you believe her story or not? Her story about me? Nothing else matters. If she hasn't got some sort of a hysterical crush on me, the whole business falls to the ground and it's some complicated MGB plot we can't understand. Now, did you believe the girl?
Bond's voice was urgent, and his eyes searched the other man's face. Ah, my friend. Kareem shook his head.
He spread his arms wide. "That is what I asked myself then, and it was what I asked myself the whole time since. But who can tell if a woman is lying about these things? Her eyes were bright, those beautiful, innocent eyes. Her lips were moist and parted in that heavenly mouth. Her voice was urgent and frightened at what she was doing and saying. Her knuckles were white on the guard of the railship. But what was in her heart?" Karim raised his hands. "God only knows." He brought his hands down resignedly. He placed them flat on the desk and looked straight at Bond. "There is only one way of telling if a woman really loves you, and even that way can only be read by an expert." "Yes," said Bond, dubiously. "I know what you mean. In bed." Well, I didn't know what he meant, but I guess that's what he means. Adam says, "What are we reading?" "We are reading From Russia with Love by Ian Fleming. It's a James Bond story." Let's see. Berlita says, "You could tell how much a woman likes you by her feet. If they are behind her, if they are behind her ears, she really, really likes you." Oh my god. Berlita. That's terrible. True. It's true though. Oh man. What'd you say? But it's not wrong. Yeah, you're not wrong, Berlita. You're definitely not wrong. I'd be more impressed with the feet behind the ears. Like, what the fuck? Unless she's bent the other way. I don't know. It's gonna be painful. Let's see. Oh no, I tried to refresh kick just in case, and now I think I kind of messed it up. It's like not loading. No. Oh no. Oh no. Something happened. It's doing stuff. It's doing stuff that I didn't want it to do. Oh snap. Let's see. Open it in a new tab. Will it load? Ah, okay, cool. Okay, it loaded. Yes. Alright, there we go. Well, Berlita, I guess you're having a good night. Alright, now we are on chapter 15. Oh no, I hope I don't have to read anything about, like, about the in bed stuff. I haven't read this book, so I don't know if it's gearing up to me having to read stuff like that. Let's see. Berlita says that he's got a story for me later. Ooh, cool. I'm looking forward to it. Alright, so we're on chapter 15. Background to a spy. Coffee came again, and then more coffee, and the big room grew thick with cigarette smoke as the two men took each shred of evidence, dissected it, and put it aside. At the end of an hour they were back where they had started. It was up to Bond to solve the problem of this girl, and if he was satisfied with her story, get her and the machine out of the country. So the machine is a cipher that will allow um, England to intercept all the like top secret messages that Russia is sending, to and fro from their embassies and their military bases and stuff. So this girl Romanova promised that she would bring them that cipher, but
Good old James Bond has to take one for the team and meet up with this girl. Let's see. Karim undertook to look after the administrative problems. As a first step, he picked up the telephone and spoke to his travel agent and reserved 2 seats on every outgoing plane for the next week by BEA, Air France, SAS, and Turk Air. "And now you must have a passport," he said. "One will be sufficient. She can travel as your wife. One of my men will take your photograph, and he will find a photograph of some girl who looks more or less like her. As a matter of fact, an early picture of Garbo would serve. There is a certain resemblance. He can get one from the newspaper files. I will speak to the Consul General. He is an excellent fellow. He likes my little cloak and dagger plots. The passport will be ready by this evening. What name would you like to have?" Take one out of a hat. Let's see. "Somerset. My mother came from there. David Somerset. Profession? Company director. That means nothing. And the girl? Let us say Caroline. She looks like a Caroline. A couple of clean-limbed young English" why is it spaced like that? English "people with a taste for travel. France control form? Leave that to me. It will show £80 in traveller's checks, let's say, and a receipt from the bank to show you changed 50 while you were in Turkey. Customs? They never look at anything. Only too glad if somebody has bought something in the country. You will declare some Turkish delight presents for your friends in London. If you have to get out quickly, leave your hotel bill and luggage to me. They know me well enough at the palace. Anything else?" "I can't think of anything else." Karim looked at his watch. 12 o'clock. Just time for the car to take you back to your hotel. There might be a message. And have a good look at your things to see if anyone has been inquisitive." He rang the bell and fired instructions at the head clerk, who stood with his sharp eyes at Karim's, and his lean head straining forward like a whippet's. Karim led Bond to the door. There came again the warm, powerful hand clasp. "The car will bring you to lunch," he said. "A little place in the Spice Bazaar." His eyes looked happily into Bond's. "And I am glad to be walking with you. We will do well together." He let go of Bond's hand. "And now, I have a lot of things to do very quickly. They may be the wrong things, but at any rate," he grinned broadly, "Joan mal, mais joan vite." I think it's French. I don't know what he's saying. And I don't know if I pronounced it right. Sorry. The head clerk, who seemed to be some sort of chief of staff to Karim, led Bond through another door in the wall of the raised platform. The heads were still bowed over the ledgers. There was a short passage with rooms on either side. The man led the way into one of these, and Bond found himself in an extremely well equipped dark room and laboratory. In 10 minutes he was out again on the street. The rolls edged out of the narrow alley and back again on the Galata bridge. A new concierge was on duty at the Crystal Palace, a small, obsequious man with guilty eyes and a yellow face. He came out from behind the desk, his hands spread in apology. "Effendi, I greatly regret. My colleague showed you to an inadequate room. It was not realized that you are a friend of Karim Bey. Your things have been moved to number 12. It is the best room in the hotel, in fact." The concierge leaned. "It is the room reserved for honeymoon couples."
every comfort. My apologies, Effendi. The other room is not intended for visitors of distinction. Oh, so he's getting a fancy room now. Did they fumigate for bed bugs in that room? Because I don't know, it's he was in room 13 and there's bed bugs, now he's in room 12. I'm pretty sure the bed bugs are still gonna be over there in room 12. Like I don't think it really matters unless the bed bugs are trained to only go after the low income payers. Let's see. Okay. The man executed an oily bow, washing his hands. If there was one thing Bond couldn't stand, it was the sound of his boots being licked. He looked the concierge in the eyes and said, "Oh." The eyes slid away. "Let me see this room. I may not like it. I was quite comfortable where I was." "Oh, certainly, Effendi." The man bowed Bond to the lift. The man bowed Bond to the lift. Okay. "But alas, the plumbers are in your former room. The water supply—" The voice trailed away. The lift rose about 10 feet and stopped at the first floor. Well, the story of the plumbers makes sense, reflected Bond. And after all, there was no harm in having the best room in the hotel. The concierge unlocked a high door and stood back. Bond had to approve. The sun streamed in through wide double windows that gave on to a small balcony. The motif was pink and gray, and the style was mock French Empire, battered by the years, but still with all the elegance of the turn of the century. There were fine Bokhara rugs on the parquet floor. A glittering chandelier hung from the ornate ceiling. The bed against the right-hand wall was huge. A large mirror in a gold frame covered most of the wall behind it. Bond was amused. The honeymoon room. Surely there should be a mirror on the ceiling as well. Oh my god. Where's the ceiling mirror? Okay, it better be there, 'cause then it ain't the honeymoon suite. Just saying. Let's see. The adjoining bathroom was tiled and fitted with everything, including a bidet and a shower. Bond's shaving things were neatly laid out. The concierge followed Bond back into the bedroom, and when Bond said he would take the room, bowed himself gratefully out. Why not? Bond again walked round the room. This time he carefully inspected the walls and the neighborhood of the bed and the telephone. Why not take the room? Why would there be microphones or secret doors? What would be the point of them? His suitcase was on a bench near the chest of drawers. He knelt down. No scratches round the lock. The bit of fluff he had trapped in the clasp was still there. He unlocked the suitcase and took out the little attaché case. Again, no signs of interference. Bond locked the case and got to his feet. He washed and went out of the room and down the stairs. No, there had been no messages for the Effendi. The concierge bowed as he opened the door of the rolls. Was there a hint of conspiracy behind the permanent guilt in those eyes? Bond decided not to care if there was. The game, whatever it was, had to be played out. If the change of rooms had been the opening gambit, so much the better. The game had to begin somewhere. As the car sped back down the hill, Bond's thoughts turned to Darko Karim. What a man for head of Station T! His size alone, in this country of furtive, stunted little men, would give him authority and his giant vitality and love of life would make everyone his friend. Where had this exuberant, shrewd pirate come from? And how had he come to work for the service? He was the rare type of man that Bond loved, and Bond already felt prepared to add Kareem to the half dozen of those real friends whom Bond, who had no acquaintances, would be ready to take to his heart. Oh, that's nice. Bond has friends. You're not an acquaintance, you're my friend. That's nice. The car went back over the Galata Bridge and drew up outside the vaulted arcades of the Spice Bazaar. The chauffeur led the way up the shallow worn steps and into the fog of exotic scents, shouting curses excuse me, shouting curses at the beggars and sack-laden porters. Inside, the entrance of the chauffeur turned left out of the stream of shuffling, jabbering humanity and showed Bond a small arch in the thick wall. The turret-like stone steps curled upwards. "Effendi, you will find Karim Bey in the far room on the left. You have only to ask. He is known to all." Bond climbed the cool stairs to a small ante room, where a waiter, without asking his name, took charge and led him through a maze of small, colorfully tiled, vaulted rooms to where Karim was sitting at a corner table over the entrance to the bazaar. Karim greeted him boisterously, waving a glass of milky liquid in which ice twinkled. "Here you are, my friend! Now, at once, some raki. You must be exhausted after your sightseeing." He fired orders at the waiter. Bond sat down in a comfortable arm-chair and took the small tumbler the waiter offered him. He lifted it towards Karim and tasted it. It was identical with ouzo. He drank it down at once. The waiter refilled his glass. "And now to order your lunch. They eat nothing but offal cooked in rancid olive oil in Turkey. At least the offal at the Mizar Karsarsi is the best." The grinning waiter made suggestions. "He says the doner kebab is very good today. I don't believe him, but it can be. It is a very young lamb broiled over charcoal with savory rice, lots of onions in it. Or is there anything you prefer? A pilaf? Or some of those damned stuffed peppers they eat here? All right, then. And you must start with a few sardines grilled en papillote. They are just edible." Kareem, uh, what? Kareem harangued the waiter. He sat back, smiling at Bond. "This is the only way to treat these damned people. They love to be cursed and kicked. It is all they understand. It is in the blood. All this penance of democracy is killing them. They want some sultans and wars and rape and fun. Poor brutes in their striped suits and bowler hats. They are miserable. You've only got to look at them. However, to hell with them all. Any news?" Bond shook his head. He told Kareem about the change of room and the untouched suitcase. Kareem downed a glass of raki and wiped his mouth on the back of his hand. Let's see, Brolita said they want war, rape, and fun? Yeah, those are three separate things, Brolita, you know? War, rape, and fun. You don't have fun when you rape people, I guess. I don't know, man. You don't have fun when you war either. Those are all different. Let's see, what'd you say? Well, that's like what I want out of every time I play Skyrim. Oh no, you do raping in Skyrim. Those poor NPCs. They're gonna find you. Let's see. He echoed the thought Bond had had. Well, the game must begin sometime. I have made certain small moves. Now we can only wait and see. We will make a little foray into enemy territory after lunch. I think it will interest you. Oh, we shan't be seen. We shall move in the shadows underground. Kareem laughed delightedly at his cleverness. And now let us talk about other things. How do you like turkey? No, I don't want to know. What else? Let's see. Verlita said they'll never catch me. The NPCs will never catch you. I mean, that makes sense. You got that, like, running machine thing. Let's see. They were interrupted by the arrival of their first course. Bond sardines and papillote tasted like any other fried sardines. Karim set about a large plate of what appeared to be strips of raw fish. He saw Bond's look of interest. "Raw fish," he said. "After this I shall have raw meat and lettuce, and then I shall have a bowl of yogurt. I am not a fadist, but I once trained to be a professional strongman. It is a good profession in Turkey. The public loves them, and my trainer insisted that I should eat only raw food. I got the habit. It is good for me, but—" He waved his fork. "I do not pretend it is good for everyone. I don't care the hell what other people eat, so long as they enjoy it. I can't stand sad eaters and sad drinkers." "Why did you decide not to be a strong man? How did you get into this racket?" Karim forked up a strip of fish, and tore at it with his teeth. He drank down half a tumbler of raki. He lit a cigarette and sat back in his chair. "Well," he said with a sour grin, "we might as well talk about me as about anything else. And you must be wondering, how did this big crazy man get into the service? I will tell you, but briefly, because it is a very long story. You will stop me if you get bored, all right?" "Fine." Bond lit a diplomat. He leant forward on his elbows. "I come from Trebizond." Karim watched his cigarette smoke curl upward. "We were a huge family, with many mothers. My father was the sort of man women can't stand. Or, I'm sorry, can't resist. All women want to be swept off their feet. In their dreams they long to be slung over a man's shoulder and taken into a cave and raped. Oh man, here's more of that raping stuff. That was his way with them. My father was a great fisherman, and his fame was spread all over the Black Sea. He went after the swordfish. They are difficult to catch and hard to fight, and he would always outdo all the others after these fish. Women liked their men to be heroes. He was a kind of hero in a corner of Turkey where it is tradition for the men to be tough. He was a big, romantic sort of fellow, so he could have any woman he wanted. He wanted them all, and sometimes killed other men to get them. Naturally, he had many children. We all lived on top of each other in a great rumbling old ruin of a house that our aunts made habitable. The aunts really amounted to a harem. One of them was an English governess from Istanbul. My father had been watching a circus. Yeah. Okay, yeah. He took a fancy to her and she to him, and that evening he put her on board his fishing boat and sailed up the Bosphorus and back to Trebizond. I don't think she ever regretted it. I think she forgot all the world except him. She died just after the war. She was 60. The child before me had been an Italian girl, and the girl had called him Bianco. He was fair. I was dark. I got to be called Darko. There were 15 of us children, and we had a wonderful childhood. Our aunts fought often, and so did we. It was like a gypsy encampment. It was held together by my father, who thrashed us, women or children, when we were a nuisance, but he was good to us when we were peaceful and obedient. You couldn't understand such a family. Let's see, Relia said, the more you know about women. Whammon. Yes. Cue that meme where that dude's like, ha! Women. The way you describe it, I can. Anyway, so it is, and so it was. I grew up to be nearly as big a man as my father, but better educated. My mother saw to that. My father only taught us to be clean, and to go to the lavatory once a day, and never to feel shame about anything in the world. My mother also taught me a regard for England, but that is by the way. By the time I was 20, I had a boat of my own and I was making money. But I was wild. I left the big house and went to live in 2 small rooms on the waterfront. I wanted to have my women where my mother would not know. There was a stroke of bad luck. I had a little Bezarabian hellcat. I won her in a fight with some gypsies here in the hills behind Istanbul. Oh my god. He won some chick, huh? As Berlita said, ever see Blazing Saddles? I did. I saw it for the first time uh like 2 months ago? 3 months ago? That shit was hilarious. Alright, oh, I lost my place. Berlita, rape, murder, arson, and rape. Oh my god, Berlita, you said rape twice. I like rape. Jeez. Yeah. What is that other saying? It's like rape the churches and burn the women. You just gotta switch it, you know? Charming sign here. Yeah, that's right, Berlita. Oh, you never heard that before? I think that's like a Marine thing. My husband told me that one. You rape the churches and burn the women. I don't know. Doesn't make sense. But I think that's the point. Alright, let's see. So he won some gypsy girl in Istanbul. Um, they came after me, but I got her on board the boat. I had to knock her unconscious first. Oh my god. She was still trying to kill me when we got back to Trebizond. So I got her to my place and took away all her clothes and kept her chained naked under the table. What the fuck? Oh my god. Okay. When I ate, I used to throw scraps to her under the table like a dog. She had to learn who was master. Before that could happen, my mother did an unheard of thing. She visited my place without warning. She came to tell me that my father wanted to see me immediately. She found the girl. My mother was really angry with me for the first time in my life. Angry? No, she was beside herself. I was a cruel ne'er-do-well, and she was ashamed to call me her son. The girl must immediately be taken back to her people. My mother brought her some of her own clothes from the house. The girl put them on, but when the time came, she refused to leave me. Darko Karim laughed hugely. An interesting lesson in female psychology, my dear friend. However, the problem of the girl is another story. While my mother was fussing over her and getting nothing but gypsy curses for her pains, I was having an interview with my father, who had heard nothing of all this, and who never did hear. My mother was like that. There was another man with my father, a tall, quiet Englishman with a black patch over one eye. They were talking about the Russians. The Englishman wanted to know what they were doing along their frontier, about what was going on at Bochum, their big oil and naval base only 50 miles away from Trebizond. He would pay good money for information. I knew English and I knew Russian. I had good eyes and ears. I had a boat. My father had decided that I would work for the Englishman. And that Englishman, my dear friend, was Major Dancy, my predecessor as head of this station. And the rest, Karim made a wide gesture with his cigarette holder, you can imagine. Okay, so like he fought for this girl, won her in a fight, I guess kidnapped her because she didn't want to go with him, and then chained her under his table and fed her scraps of food after he ate, and then she didn't want to leave him. It kind of sounds like Stockholm syndrome, but I mean, who knows? I don't freaking know. This is weird. All right. But what about this training to be a professional strongman? Ah, said Karim slyly. That was only a sideline. Our traveling circus were almost the only Turks allowed through the frontier. The Russians cannot live without circuses. It is as simple as that. I was the man who broke chains and lifted weights by a rope between my teeth. I wrestled against the local strongmen in the Russian villages, and some of those Georgians are giants. Fortunately, they are stupid giants, and I nearly always won. Afterwards, at the drinking, there was always much gossip and talk. I would look foolish and pretend not to understand. Every now and then I would speak an innocent question, and they would laugh at my stupidity and tell me the answer. Wait, so does he have what kind of accent does he have? Does he have an English accent or a Russian accent? Mm. Or a Turkish accent? I don't even know what they sound like. The second course came, and with it a bottle of Kavaklidir, a rich, coarse Burgundy like any other Balkan wine. The kebab was good and tasted of smoked bacon, fat, and onions. Karim ate a kind of excuse me, a steak tartare, a large flat hamburger of finely minced raw meat laced with peppers and chives and bound together with yolk of egg. He made Bond try a forkful. It was delicious. Bond said so. You ought to eat it every day, said Karim earnestly. It is good for those who wish to make much love. There are certain exercises you should do for the same purposes. These things are important to men, or at least they are to me. Like my father, I consume a large quantity of women. But, unlike him, I also drink and smoke too much, and these things do not go well with making love. Nor does this work I do. Too many tensions and too much thinking. It takes the blood to the head instead of where it should be for love making. But I am greedy for life. I do too much of everything all the time. Suddenly, one day my heart will fail. The iron crab will get me as it got my father. But I am not afraid of the crab. At least, I shall have died from an honorable disease. Perhaps they will put on my tombstone, "This man died from living too much." Bond laughed. "Ha! Don't go too soon, Darko," he said. "M would be very displeased. He thinks the world of you." Oh, he does. Karim searched Bond's face to see if he was telling the truth. He laughed delightedly. In that case, I will not let the crab have my body yet. He looked at his watch. Come, James, he said. It is good that you reminded me of my duty. We will have coffee in the office. There is not much time to waste. Every day at 2:30 the Russians have their council of war. Today you and I will do them the honor of being present at their deliberations. And now we are on chapter 16. It's kind of short, and I need to get my water because my throat's feeling kind of dry. Brilliant. So then, if you want to rest your voice for a moment, I don't know. I'm reading the chat though. Should I not read the chat out loud? Let's see. I think chapter 16 is. It's like only 5 pages long. Oh, I lied. It's 9 pages long. Let's see, what's Berlia saying? He said, you see, there's this one steep hill in my neighborhood that's been a constant test of endurance in the 10-ish years I've lived here. Today, I managed to run the entire way up it without stopping. Nice. I haven't been able to do this in years. Dude, that's awesome. You know, it's probably because of the testosterone that you've been taking. Or not the testosterone. Steroids? One of those things. That's probably what it is, because that helps your body to like recover and to actually, perform better physically in anything. Let's see. Hells yeah, hail to the Pantsu King! The warrior women's wear, the man in the battle dress. Oh my god. No, that's awesome. That's really great. I'm so happy for you, Like it's hard to get healthy after something has happened in your life, and I'm really happy that you're getting better, and that you're able to achieve those goals. It's awesome. Let's see, Belia said, but not just that, but doing these speed run races has reignited my competitive spirit. Ayy, nice. Yeah, now you can have your own speed runs in real life. Oh, okay, I need to grab my computer charger. Where is it? My computer cable. Where is it? Oh, that's not it. Oh crap. Uh, Hold on. Give me 1 second. Okay, let's see. And Berlita said, to outdo the competition and myself feels good. And I'm down 9-ish pounds. The scale keeps going back and forth because I'm shedding fat and also rebuilding muscle. Yeah, that's the one thing that's hard when like getting in shape. It's like, am I? You can't really judge your weight just on the scale. It's like, you'll gain weight and lose weight, but like you're gaining muscle and then you're losing fat, but muscle weighs more than fat, so it's like you're kind of going back and forth like, am I losing weight? Am I getting healthy? What's going on? But usually it's that you're gaining more muscle and that muscle weighs more than the fat. But that's awesome, dude. Don't forget to have that collagen. That collagen mix. That'll help you out as well.
Let's see, you feel pretty aggressive in a good way. So there's that too. That's awesome. All right. We're on the final chapter. Oh my god, Verlita. In conclusion, steroids rule. Yeah, don't take them illegally though, okay? That's not what we're promoting here. Alright, 16. The Tunnel of Rats. Ugh. Of rats. Ugh. Back in the cool office, while they waited for the inevitable coffee, Karim opened a cupboard in the wall and pulled out sets of engineer's blue overalls. Karim stripped his shorts and dressed himself in one of the suits and pulled on a pair of rubber boots. Bond picked out a suit and a pair of boots that more or less fitted him, and put them on. With the coffee, the head clerk brought in 2 powerful flashlights, which he put on the desk. What the heck? Why are they changing? When the clerk had left the room, Karim said, "He is one of my sons, the eldest one. The others in there are all my children. The chauffeur and the watchman are all uncles of mine. Common blood is the best security, and this spice business is good cover for us all. M set me up in it. He spoke to friends of his in the city of London. I am now the leading spice merchant in Turkey. I have long ago repaid M the money that was lent me. My children are shareholders in the business. They have a good life. When there is secret work to be done and I need help, I choose the child who will be most suitable. They all have training in different secret things. They are clever and brave. Some have already killed for me. They would all die for me and for M. I have taught them he is just below God." Wow, jeez. That's pretty intense. Okay, what's going on with my face? Why is it like stuck like that? There we go. Kareem made a deprecating wave. "But that is just to tell you that you are in good hands." "I hadn't imagined anything different." "Ha!" said Kareem, noncommittally. He picked up the torches and handed one to Bond. "And now to work." Kareem walked over to the wide glass-fronted bookcase and put his hand behind it. There was a click, and the bookcase rolled silently and easily along the wall to the left. Behind it was a small door, flush with the wall. Kareem pressed one side of the door and swung inwards to reveal a dark tunnel with stone steps leading straight down. A dank smell, mixed with a faint zoo stench, came out into the room. "You go first," said Kareem. "Go down the steps to the bottom and wait. I must fix the door." Bond switched on his torch and stepped through the opening and went carefully down the stairs. The light of the torch showed fresh masonry, and 20 feet below, a glimmer of water. When Bond got to the bottom, he found that the glimmer was a small stream running down a central gutter in the floor of an ancient stone-walled tunnel that sloped steeply up to the right. To the left, the tunnel went on downwards, and would, he guessed, come out below the surface of the Golden Horn. I had almost forgot that, like, British people call flashlights torches, and I'm like, how do you turn on and off a torch? Like, that doesn't make sense. Oh my god, Berlita said he's doing his steroids illegally this time. Just ignore that, chat, okay? Out of range of Bond's light, there was a steady, quiet scuttling sound, and in the blackness hundreds of pin points of red light flickered and moved.
It was the same uphill and downhill. 20 yards away on either side, 1,000 rats were looking at Bond. They were sniffing his scent. Bond imagined whiskers lifting slightly from their teeth. He had a quick moment of wondering what action they would take if his torch went out. Karim was suddenly behind him. "It is a long climb, a quarter of an hour. I hope you love animals." Karim's laugh boomed hugely away up the tunnel. The rats scuffled and stirred. "Unfortunately, there is not much choice. Rats and bats, squadrons of them, divisions, a whole air force and army. And we have to drive them in front of us. Towards the end of the climb it becomes quite congested. Let's get started. The air is good. It is dry underfoot on both sides of the stream, but in winter the floods come and then we have to use frogmen suits. Keep your torch on my feet. If a bat gets in your hair, brush him off. It will not be often. Their radar is very good." They set off up the steep slope. The smell of the rats and the droppings of the bats was thick, a mixture of monkey house and chicken battery. It occurred to Bond that it would be days before he got rid of it. Clusters of bats hung like bunches of withered grapes from the roof, and when, from time to time, either Karim's head or Bond's brushed against them, they exploded twittering into the darkness. Ahead of them, as they climbed, there was the forest of squeaking, scuffling red pinpoints that grew denser on both sides of the central gutter. Occasionally Karim flashed his torch forward and the light shone on a gray field sown with glittering teeth and glinting whiskers. When this happened, an extra frenzy seized the rats, and those nearest jumped on the backs of the others to get away. All the while, fighting, tumbling gray bodies came sweeping down the central gutter, and as the pressure of the mass higher up the tunnel grew heavier, the frothing rear rank came closer. The two men kept their torches leveled like guns on the rear ranks until, after a good quarter of an hour's climb, they reached their destination. It was a deep alcove of newly faced brick in the side wall of the tunnel. There were two benches on each side of a thick tarpaulin wrapped object that came down from the ceiling of the alcove. They stepped inside. Another few yards climb, Bond thought, and mass hysteria must have seized the distant thousands of rats further up the tunnel. The horde would have turned. Out of sheer pressure for space, the rats would have braved the lights and hurled themselves down on to the two intruders in spite of the two glaring eyes and the threatening scent. "Watch," said Karim. There was a moment of silence. Further up the tunnel the squeaking had stopped, as if at a word of command. Then, suddenly, the tunnel was a foot deep in a great wave of hurtling, scrambling gray bodies as, with a continuous high-pitched squeal, the rats turned and pelted back down the slope. For minutes the sleek gray river foamed by outside the alcove until at last the numbers thinned and only a trickle of sick or wounded rats came limping and probing their way down the tunnel floor. What the fuck? I hate all this. I would hate to be in this situation. The scream of the horde slowly vanished down towards the river until there was silence except for the occasional twitter of a fleeing bat. Karim gave a non-committal grunt. "One of these days those rats will start dying. Then we shall have the plague in Istanbul again. Sometimes I feel guilty for not telling the authorities of this tunnel so that they can clean the place up. But I can't so long as the Russians are up here." He jerked his head at the roof. He looked at his watch. 5 minutes to go. They will be pulling up their chairs and fiddling with their papers. There will be the 3 permanent men. MGB or one of them may be from Army Intelligence, GRU or GRU. And there will probably be 3 others. 2 came in a fortnight ago and though Greece and another through Paris. Another one arrived on Monday. God knows who they are or what they are here for. And sometimes the girl, Tatiana, comes in with a signal and goes out. Let us hope we will see her today. You will be impressed. She is something. Karim reached up and untied the tarpaulin cover and pulled it downwards. Bond understood. The cover protected the shining butt of the submarine periscope, fully withdrawn. The moisture glistened on the thick grease of the exposed bottom joint. Bond chuckled. Where the hell did you get that from, Darko?
Turkish Navy. War surplus.
Karim's voice did not invite further questions. Now, Q branch in London is trying to fix some way of wiring the damn thing for sound. It's not going to be easy. The lens at the top of this is no bigger than a cigarette lighter, end on. When I raise it, it comes up to floor level in their room. In the corner of the room, where it comes up, we cut a small mouse hole. We did it well. Once, when I came to have a look, the first thing I saw was a big mouse trap with a piece of cheese on it. At least, it looked big through the lens. Karim laughed briefly. But there's not much room to fit a sensitive pickup alongside the lens, and there's no hope of getting in again to do any more fiddling about with their architecture. The only way I managed to install this thing was to get my friends in the Public Works Ministry to turn the Russians out for a few days. The story was that the trams going up the hill were shaking and the foundations of the houses were shaking. There had to be a survey. It cost me a few £100 for the right pockets. The Public Works inspected half a dozen houses on either side of this one and declared the place safe. By that time, I and the family had finished our construction work. The Russians were suspicious as hell. I gather they went over the place with a tooth comb when they got back, looking for microphones and bombs and so on. But we can't work that trick twice, unless Q Branch can think up something very clever. I shall have to be content with keeping an eye on them. One of these days they'll give away something useful. They'll be interrogating someone we're interested in, or something of that sort. Alongside the matrix of the periscope in the roof of the alcove, there was a pendulous blister of metal, twice the size of a football. "What's that?" said Bond. "Bottom half of a bomb. A big bomb. If anything happens to me, or if war breaks out with Russia, that bomb will be set off by radio control from my office. It is sad." Karim didn't look sad. "But I fear that many innocent people will get killed besides the Russians. When the blood is on the boil, man is as unselective as nature." Karim had been polishing away at the hooded eyepieces between the 2 handlebars that stuck out on both sides of the base of the periscope. Now he glanced at his watch and bent down and gripped the 2 handles and slowly brought them up level with his chin. There was a hiss of hydraulics as the glistening stem of the periscope slid up into its steel sheath in the roof of the alcove. Karim bent his head and gazed into the eyepieces and slowly inched up the handles until he could stand upright. He twisted gently. He centered the lens and beckoned to Bond. Just the 6 of them." Bond moved over and took the handles. "Have a good look at them," said Kareem. "I know them, but you'd better get to know their faces in your mind. Head of the table is their resident director. On his left are his 2 staff. Opposite them are the 3 new ones. The latest, who looks quite an important chap, is on the director's right. Tell me if they do anything except talk." Bond's first impulse was to tell Kareem not to make so much noise. It was as if he was in the room with the Russians, as if he was sitting in a chair in the corner, a secretary perhaps, taking shorthand of the conference. Wow, so they're like hardcore spying on these guys. Like, it's not, "Ooh, I'm just peeking in at you." Like, they hear them talking. The wide, all-around lenses designed for spotting aircraft as well as surface ships gave him a curious picture. A mouse's eye view of a forest of legs below the foredge of the table, and various aspects of the heads belonging to the legs. The director and his 2 colleagues were clear, serious, dull Russian faces whose characteristics Bond filed away. There was the studious professional face of the director. Thick spectacles, lantern jaw, big forehead and thin hair brushed back. On his left was a square wooden face with deep clefts on either side of the nose, fair hair and brows, and a nick out of the left ear. The 3rd member of the permanent staff had a shifty Armenian face with clever bright almond eyes. He was talking now. His face wore a falsely humble look. Gold glinted in his mouth. Bond could see less of the 3 visitors. Their backs were half towards him, and only the profile of the nearest and presumably most junior showed clearly. This man's skin also was dark. He too would be from one of the southern republics. The jaw was badly shaven, and the eye in profile was bovine and dull under a thick black brow. The nose was fleshy and porous. The upper lip was long over a sullen mouth and the beginning of a double chin. The tough black hair was cut very short so that most of the back of the neck looked blue to the level of the tips of the ears. It was a military haircut, done with mechanical clippers. Geez, the descriptions though sometimes. Like, I feel offended. And I'm not the one being described here. The only clues to the next man were an angry boil on the back of a fat bald neck, a shiny blue suit, and rather bright brown shoes. The man was motionless during the whole period that Bond kept watch and apparently never spoke. Now, the senior visitor, on the right of the resident director, sat back and began talking. It was a strong, crag-like profile with big bones and a jutting chin under a heavy brown mustache of Stalin cut. Bond could see one cold gray eye under a bushy eyebrow and a low forehead topped by wiry gray-brown hair. This man was the only one who was smoking. He puffed busily at a tiny wooden pipe in the bowl of which stood half a cigarette. Every now and then he shook the pipe sideways so that the ash fell on the floor. His profile had more authority than any of the other faces. Excuse me. And Bond guessed that he was a senior man sent down from Moscow. Bond's eyes were getting tired. He twisted the handles gently and looked round the office as far as the blurring, jagged edges of the mouse hole would allow. He saw nothing of interest: 2 olive green filing cabinets, a hat stand by the door on which he counted 6 more or less identical gray Homburgs,
and a sideboard with a heavy carafe of water, and some glasses. Bond stood away from the eyepiece, rubbing his eyes. If only we could hear. Wait, I thought they could hear. I don't know. Maybe I'm too tired. If only we could hear, Kareem said, shaking his head sadly. It would be worth diamonds. It would solve a lot of problems, agreed Bond. Then, by the way, Darko, how did you come on this tunnel? What was it built for? Kareem bent and gave a quick glance into the eyepieces and straightened up. It's a lost drain from the Hall of Pillars, he said. The Hall of Pillars is now a thing for tourists. It's up above us on the heights of Istanbul, near St. Sophia. 1,000 years ago, it was built as a reservoir in case of siege. It's a huge underground palace, 100 yards long and about half as broad. It was made to hold millions of gallons of water. It was discovered again about 400 years ago by a man called Gilius. One day I was reading his account of fighting it. He said it was filled in winter from, quote, a great pipe with a mighty noise. It occurred to me that there might be another great pipe. Oh yeah, there might be another great pipe to empty it quickly if the city fell to the enemy. I went up to the Hall of Pillars and bribed the watchman and rowed about among the pillars all one night in a rubber dinghy with one of my boys. We went over the walls with a hammer and an echo sounder. At one end, in the most likely spot, there was a hollow sound. I handed out more money to the Minister of Public Works, and he closed the place for a week. For cleaning, quote. My little team got busy. Kareem ducked down again for a look through the eyepieces and went on. We dug into the wall about water level and came on the top of an arch. The arch was the beginning of the tunnel. We got into the tunnel and went down it. Quite exciting, not knowing where we were going to come out. And, of course, it went straight down the hill, under the Street of Books, where the Russians have where they have their place, and out into the Golden Horn by the Galata Bridge, 20 yards away from my warehouse. So we filled in our hole in the Hall of Pillars and started digging from my end. That was 2 years ago. It took us a year and a lot of survey work to get directly under the Russians. Kareem laughed. Ha! And now I suppose one of these days the Russians will decide to change their offices. By then I hope someone else will be head of T. Kareem bent down to the rubber eyepieces. Bond saw him stiffen. Kareem said urgently, "The door's opened. Quick, take over. Here she comes." Ooh. So we have Miss Tatiana Romanova appear in their little stakeout, I suppose, of the Russian office. But that brings us to the end of chapter 16. So next week we'll be starting chapter 17 and we'll see what happens during their little investigation of Miss Romanova and her supposed crazy infatuation with James Bond that she must have him to love and to hold. But that's it for me tonight. Thank you everyone for coming by. I hope to see you next week or on Tuesday, the next time I stream. I'm going to be streaming a different game. I'm not quite sure which game I'll be playing. And Tika says, I'll always be here. Remember Leah's doing his little rage face. But yeah,
I'll see what game I'm gonna play, cause I've been playing a lot of multiplayer games, and I'm thinking about starting up Uncharted again, because the entire series is really good. I haven't played the newest one where they have where it like focuses on Chloe, I think that's her name. So we'll see what we do. And yeah, I appreciate you guys. Take it easy. Give me a follow if you like, and you could become a fellow madman. Alright, have a good one. Bye!